Okay, so let's get started. So to make our game, we'll first have a folder, and we'll call it MP multiplayer template 1, and we'll create an index. We'll create an HTML file, main.html, yes, and open it up. And we need the doc type, HTML, the head, the title, and we'll give the title, we'll call it 3D multiplayer game, and body. Okay. And what else do we need? We'll have a container to hold our Three.js scene. And we'll have script source js/main.js. This will be where our this will be the main JS file, and we'll create that now. So we'll save this file inside this folder called JS, and we'll call it main.js. So we have that file. Script. There we go. And what else? We'll need a style. So link. It's going to be a style sheet. href css main.css. And we'll create that file now. You can go to new, save as. We'll create that CSS folder. Inside that folder, we'll save this main.css file. And inside the main.css, we'll give the body a margin of 0 pixels and overflow hidden. We'll save that. Okay, so how do we reference? We need a reference to the Three.js library. So we can use this. And okay, so let's go into the main folder and add some things. So we have the container, the scene, the camera, the renderer, the controls. The controls will be the player controls. These are all basic things for Three.js. And we will call these function init and animate, but they don't exist yet, so we'll go ahead and create them. And we'll create the animate function as well, and the this function called render. So within the init function, we will do a few things. Again, this is a basic way to set up a Three.js scene or environment. We'll create a container, and we'll use the ID of container, which we referenced here. And we'll create a scene by passing it a scene object and a camera. And we can get rid of this position setting. And we'll create a renderer and set the renderer size. So That's how we can leave a comment here to let us know that this is just a basic setup of a scene. And then we'll do some event handling here. So events. One event we really care about is window resizing. So event listener, if I can spell correctly. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Resize on window resize false. So we pass it this function, and we need to create this function on window resize, and we'll go ahead and just use previous code. You can pause the video at any time and get this code. And also this project is on GitHub, so you can access it there as well. So now we will finish this initializing function. Init stands for initializing, by the way. Container.append child render.dom element. So we're appending the render DOM element to our container, and then we'll append the container to the body of the document. Okay, request animation frame and render. So what is happening so far? We are initializing our scene, and we're animating the scene. So within here, this is going to be the animation loop, and this is the renderer loop. So here we'll need to do a few things with the renderer. We'll need to clear it, and we'll need to render the scene like that. Okay, so we've just done some basic Three.js things. Let's get started with our game. Let's make sure this is working first, just so we're clear. I'm going to run the Mongoose application. It runs automatically, and I'll go here to our project, mp template1 main.html. So this is what we would expect. It's just a blank screen, and on the console there's no error, so we seem to be good so far. So what do we need now? We need to do a few things. Let's see. We have our main flow. We need the game. So to create our, let's create an environment, for example. Let's just put a sphere at the center. So I'm going to copy this script and create a file called game.js, and we can go directly to our file in here and create text file game.js. And I said let's have a function where we load the game, and inside that function we load the environment, we initialize the player, and we initialize the player. Yeah. So function load game. So we want to do a few things: load the environment and load the player. And we'll call this function in our main function here. Maybe here is good. All right. Load game world. So right now it does nothing, of course. So load the environment. Let's write a separate function for that, where we just put a sphere at the center of our world. So load environment, And so sphere, we can use this code where we create a geometry material and instantiate the mesh and add it to the scene. So let's call that function here. And if we test this, of course we don't see anything because our camera is at the same position as the sphere. So let's maybe move the camera back a bit. Camera.position.x equals 5. Let's save that. Still not working. I didn't mean x, I meant z. There we go. So the z-axis is we're moving. The z-axis is towards the screen or away from the screen. And the y-axis is up and down, and the x-axis is left and right. So what about our player? Well, let's see. To have a player, we should design it so that we can use the same code. So we're going to be using a bit of what's called object-oriented programming. So here we'll create an object called player, and we'll pass it. Let's see, what about a player ID? That sounds good. And let's see, let's put this in a separate file just to have our objects separate from the rest of this content. So we'll create a new file and save it as player.js, player.js. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to save it as player.js. Yes. Okay. So we'll take this content, delete it from here, and save it into here. And we'll also include our player script here. So player.js. So our player has a few attributes. It's player ID. It's important to identify the player. And is this the main player? That's also important. And the player mesh. It also has a specific geometry and a material. So, but those aren't unique to that specific player. All players are going to have a cube geometry and this cube material. And we'll reference the scope by this. And we also want a way to initialize the player. By setting, by creating its mesh. Here we go. And we want to add that mesh to the scene afterwards, after initializing it. And if this is the main player, then we want to give it some sort of control. So let's go ahead and check for that. And we'll say give player control of this mesh. So give the user control of this specific player, this instance of the player. And we'll have a function called setOrientation for other players. So like if this is a specific instance of another player, then we want to be able to set its position based on like where that player is actually located. So if they've been instantiated, if their mesh exists, then we want to set their position.x equal to position.x. So this is a way to set their position, and we can do this for .z, .y. This is one way of doing it, but I think there's an easier way to do it. Instead of copying each of these attributes of the position, we can do it by one function call here. So position.copy position, rotation.copy rotation. There we go. And that should be fine. So what do we have so far? We can create the player. And let's do that then. Let's go back to our game, load the player, and let's have a reference to our player over here, player. So player equals new player, and we'll pass in an ID. Let's call it 1. This guy has an ID of 1. And then we need to initialize. As initializing will create his mesh, and then it'll add the mesh to the scene. But when it adds it to the scene, he's going to be at position 0, 0, 0. That's exactly where our sphere is. So if we run this, we'll see that it's inside. The player is actually inside of the sphere, and we can't see him or her. So let's comment out this load environment quickly, and there we go. The sphere disappears, and we can see the player. But if we uncomment, so our player is there. Now, what should we do? Well, we should give the player controls, so when we press WASD, we can move around in our environment. So let's go ahead and do that. If we go to github.com/piusnaikojo, this is my GitHub account. Go to repositories. If you scroll down to player controls, I've already written a script so that we get those controls for free. So download zip. And when it's finished, we can get that player control script, copy it, and go to our folder. I'm going to create another folder within our JS folder and call it lib for library, because this is sort of like a library, and paste our player controls inside of that folder. Now we need to reference that script, or else we can't use it. So I'll reference it up here. And lib/player controls. Make sure I spelled that right. Player controls. Yeah, that looks right. So we have a way to reference our player controls now. So let's go over here. We said in the player, if this is the main player. Oh, let's go back here real quick. So after we created our player, we didn't set that this is the main player. And this is the main player, is main player. It's true. Because by default it's false. But we want to set it to true since this is actually the main player. So now if this is the main player, then we want to give them controls. And to do that, here we can do this. So we reference our player controls, and if you're not sure how to use player controls, I have directions on how to use it here. We simply include it in our HTML file along with the Three.js library and instantiate the player controls, and then in our animate function we call controls.update. So we did just that. We instantiated the player controls. We initialized the player controls. That's actually not in the directions, but we instantiated so that the camera can go to the player directly, or it can rotate to face the player. Okay, now we need to call the update function in the animate function. So if controls, so we're wrapping it around this if because initially its controls doesn't exist, and so to call controls.update on this in this animate, it's going to produce errors because controls is null. So yeah, that should be fine now. And let's go ahead and test this. Refresh. Now I can actually rotate around and I can move the player. Alright. In the next video we'll look at how we can add other players to the environment. So right now, if you open another tab, and open the controls, we can't see one another. These are two separate things going on. So in the next video we'll have a way for this information, this player information, to be shared between people. Alright, thanks for watching.